Priya, Malhotra, and Aisha Reddy thought they were stepping into a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but the moment they entered the luxurious desert mansion, the doors locked behind them, and the dream they chased turned into a silent, deadly trap waiting to erase them forever. Priya, Malhotra, and Aisha Reddy lived two very different lives, yet both were driven by the same quiet desire for something bigger. Priya worked long hours in the design department of a luxury event company in Mumbai. She was known for her attention to detail, the kind of person who spent extra minutes making sure every ribbon matched every flower. Her life was steady but exhausting, shaped by deadlines and the pressure to prove herself. Aisha worked in the same company but in logistics. Her days were filled with spreadsheets, supplier calls, and last-minute arrangements. She was ambitious, always searching for opportunities that could eventually lift her family into a more comfortable life. Both women often stayed late at the office, scrolling through glossy social media feeds showing influencers flying in private jets and attending royal ceremonies. They never admitted it out loud, but each wished for a moment that might change everything. Their chance seemed to arrive one quiet Thursday afternoon. The company received a formal inquiry from someone claiming to be Sheikh Abdul Karim Al Hassan, described online as a wealthy Gulf aristocrat, known for hosting spectacular events attended by global elites. The message was carefully written, using polished English and professional terms that instantly made it look legitimate. It included a business proposal requesting 2 female consultants to fly to his private estate to discuss an exclusive cultural celebration worth millions. The offer included first-class tickets, a luxury suite, a generous advance payment, and the possibility of long-term partnership. Everything about it appeared genuine. The company's management, hungry for high-status clients, reacted with excitement. Their research showed social media profiles connected to royal family members, luxury brands, and philanthropic organizations. Images showed the Sheikh posing with exotic cars, gold-plated interiors, and a private jet, all appearing authentic enough to silence doubts. No one considered that images can be bought, edited, or stolen. In the world of digital displays, illusions often look more real than reality itself. Priya and Aisha were chosen immediately. Their skills, professionalism, and international travel experience made them the perfect candidates. When they were informed of the assignment, both felt a rush of adrenaline. They imagined what this opportunity could mean: career growth, financial freedom, and the chance to be part of something remarkable. It felt like the kind of break people dream about but rarely receive. They spent the next few days preparing, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. Priya carefully packed formal outfits and documents, making sure everything she carried looked polished. Aisha invested half her savings in new clothes, telling herself it was worth it for a client of this scale. At home, they reassured their families that the company had verified everything. They emphasized the prestige of the event and the safety of traveling through official channels. Their families trusted them. Their employer trusted the digital profile, and both women trusted the promise of a golden opportunity. None of them realized that the invitation had been designed with a single dark intention. Someone behind the luxurious facade had studied the company, tracked the women's routines, and crafted messages to match their ambitions perfectly. The trap was already set long before the women packed their bags, long before their flight was booked, and long before they stepped into a journey that would erase their paths forever. The moment Priya and Aisha stepped off the private jet, the atmosphere felt different from anything they had imagined. Instead of a busy international terminal buzzing with travelers and announcements, they were led into a silent, isolated building that looked more like a restricted military zone than an airport. The air smelled of fuel and desert heat, and the stillness around them felt strangely heavy. A line of black cars waited outside, their windows tinted so dark that nothing inside was visible. Before the women could even adjust their bags, 2 stern-faced security men approached, requesting their passports and phones under the claim of privacy regulations for royal guests. Everything was said with formal politeness, but there was no room for refusal. The women exchanged uncertain glances, yet the professional environment made them assume it was part of the protocol for high-profile clients. They were guided into separate vehicles, which moved in a tight convoy through a long stretch of empty road. There were no signs of a city nearby, no crowds, no traffic, only endless sand and occasional security checkpoints. Every few kilometers, armed guards stopped the cars briefly, scanned something on handheld devices, and then signaled for them to continue. The whole journey felt rehearsed and controlled. The women tried to reassure themselves that this must be the security expected around royal families. Still, the silence in the car made every small sound echo louder than it should. When the convoy reached the mansion, the sheer size of the structure left them stunned. Tall walls wrapped around the entire property, towering like the edges of a fortress rather than the borders of a home. The gates were reinforced metal, operated by biometric panels, and guarded by men who looked more like soldiers than staff. Inside the gates, the mansion itself rose with polished marble, glass windows, and fountains that glistened under the harsh sunlight. At first glance it was breathtaking, but beneath the beauty lurked a sense of unease. Nothing about the place felt warm or welcoming. Once inside, they noticed the workers moved with unusual stiffness. No one smiled, no one spoke unnecessarily. Every person seemed to follow a strict set of invisible rules. The hallways were immaculate yet strangely cold, lit by white lights that created long shadows on the floor. Aisha noticed that there were cameras everywhere, tiny ones in corners, larger ones on ceilings, and even some that looked hidden behind decorative panels. It felt less like a home and more like a monitored institution. The women were separated again and taken to different rooms under the excuse that preparations for the meeting were still underway. Priya's room was large but windowless, filled with expensive furniture and a tray of untouched refreshments. Aisha's room had a locked balcony door, heavy curtains, and a lamp that flickered slightly, casting uneasy shapes on the wall. Each minute that passed made their initial excitement fade. The absence of the Sheikh felt increasingly strange. Every powerful client they had worked with before made sure to greet arrivals personally or at least send a representative. Yet here, no one offered explanations, updates, or even small talk. When one of the security personnel escorted Priya through a corridor, she noticed that several doors were bolted shut. A faint noise echoed from somewhere deep inside the mansion, a sound that was neither mechanical nor human yet unsettling enough to make her heart pound. Meanwhile, Aisha sat alone, realizing that none of the staff carried phones or communicative devices, as if outside contact was forbidden. By the time an hour passed, both women quietly understood something they did not want to admit. They were trapped in a place that kept a beautiful exterior but hid something dark beneath its smooth surfaces. They had arrived with hope, but the mansion's silence was beginning to whisper a different truth, one they were not prepared to confront. The mansion that appeared royal and prestigious from the outside was, in reality, the center of a carefully engineered criminal network. The man calling himself Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Hassan never existed in the way the online world portrayed him. The images scattered across his social media profiles had been assembled from various sources, some stolen, some digitally altered, and some purchased from private galleries where wealthy clients sold access to their photographs. The criminal syndicate behind this false identity had spent years perfecting the illusion of a powerful figure. Every detail, from the jet photos to supposed charity events, had been built to make their trap impossible to doubt. This group specialized in a unique form of financial identity exploitation. Unlike ordinary scammers, they targeted professional women with clean backgrounds, stable employment, and international travel experience. Such profiles were valuable because they allowed the syndicate to open offshore accounts, transfer illegal funds, move cryptocurrencies, and register companies without triggering immediate suspicion. The victims' identities became shields, protecting the criminals from detection while placing all legal responsibility on the women who unknowingly walked into their plan. To maintain secrecy, the syndicate created layers upon layers of digital protection. Fake business websites, fabricated press releases, and AI-generated endorsements made the false persona of the Sheikh appear respected and influential. Even the inquiry sent to the event company had been written after months of research into the firm's structure, the working habits of its employees, and the profiles of potential targets. Priya and Aisha were chosen not randomly but with shocking precision. Their professional roles matched what the syndicate needed: people connected to legitimate companies, trusted by their employers, and likely to hand over documents without hesitation. Before the women even boarded their flights, their identities were already being replicated. Scans of their passports from the company's digital system were intercepted. Their LinkedIn profiles were copied and saved. Dozens of fake accounts using their names were created in foreign databases. The syndicate's tech team worked quietly behind the scenes, preparing the framework for accounts that would later move millions in illegal earnings. Every step was timed to align with the women's travel schedule so that suspicious activity would appear as if they were conducting work abroad. The mansion itself was merely a temporary base for this operation. Hidden behind its luxurious facade were rooms used for scanning documents, printing new identification materials, and destroying physical evidence. Thick walls concealed the noise of high-resolution machines. Deep beneath the building, a small team monitored global banks and cryptocurrency platforms, executing transactions in real time. They relied on the illusion of royal authority to intimidate visitors, ensuring no one dared question unusual protocols or demand explanations. The workers inside the mansion were not staff but victims themselves, recruited through fake job offers, stripped of their own documents, and forced into silence. Their fear was the result of witnessing what happened to those who resisted. Each person followed strict schedules, avoided unnecessary movement, and obeyed every order without hesitation. Their silence created the polished, disciplined environment that fooled guests into believing they were in the presence of high security rather than hidden criminal activity. As Priya and Aisha waited in separate rooms, the syndicate monitored their reactions through cameras. Their calmness reassured the criminals that the plan was working smoothly. The organization needed only a few hours more before executing the final phase. Once the women disappeared, their digital shadows would live on, signing documents, opening accounts, and authorizing transfers that their families would never know about until far too late. To the syndicate, the women were not human beings with families and dreams. They were tools, useful for a few days, then disposable. Their arrival at the mansion marked not the beginning of a prestigious project, but the completion of a months-long hunt. By the time they sensed something was wrong, the criminals were already preparing to erase them completely, ensuring their real identities vanished even as their stolen ones were kept alive for profit. As evening settled over the desert, the mansion's atmosphere changed in a way that was almost impossible to explain. The bright white lights that had filled the hallways during the day dimmed into a colder tone, creating long shadows that crawled along the marble floors. Staff members who once moved stiffly now moved with an urgency that revealed the truth they had been hiding. Their eyes avoided contact even more carefully. Their steps became quicker, quieter. The illusion of hospitality began to peel away, revealing the machinery of something far more sinister. For Priya and Aisha, the transition was subtle at first, but every detail added to a rising dread that filled the air like a tightening rope. Guards who had earlier behaved like polite security escorts had now changed into tactical uniforms. Their faces were expressionless, their movements synchronized, as if they were following instructions they had rehearsed many times before. The corridors that seemed open earlier now had locked doors at every turn. Electronic panels glowed on the walls, showing active restrictions. The two women did not know it, but the mansion had switched into its containment mode, a protocol used whenever a victim reached the final stage of the syndicate's plan. Priya was taken first. A guard knocked on her door and gestured for her to follow. The message delivered to her was simple and cold. Preparations were ready, and the Sheikh wanted to discuss event details personally. The explanation sounded official enough to calm her for a moment, but the route they took did not resemble any meeting area. Instead of leading her toward the main lounge or conference room, the guard guided her through narrow service corridors with peeling paint and no decorative elements, an entirely different world from the polished luxury upstairs. The deeper they walked, the colder the air became. The lights here flickered slightly, and the sound of their footsteps echoed sharply off the concrete walls. At the end of the corridor, they stopped in front of a heavy door with metal bolts and industrial hinges. A camera blinked above it, recording every movement. When the guard opened the door, Priya stepped inside a space that felt completely wrong. It was a bare room, no furniture, no windows, only a drain in the center of the floor and walls stained from previous use. Before Priya could process what was happening, the door shut behind her with a final metallic click. A second later, the muffled echo of a single gunshot ended everything. The syndicate operated with precision and speed, eliminating evidence before it could ever become a threat. Aisha waited in her room, glancing at the clock repeatedly. When the guards returned without Priya, her fear solidified. She attempted to question them, but they ignored her entirely, signaling instead for her to leave the room. The path she was taken through was different from Priya's, yet it led to the same destination. The mansion's security system activated fully now. Metal shutters slid over exterior exits, hallways sealed shut automatically, and motion sensors tracked her every movement like prey caught in a trap. Aisha's instinct screamed at her to run, and she followed the first open hallway she saw, racing toward what looked like a staircase. But before she could reach it, the doors around her slammed shut, locking her inside a square room with thick soundproof walls. The guards entered behind her, their expressions unchanged. There was no hesitation, no final warning, and no possibility of escape. The room was designed for silence, no echoes, no cries, nothing that could travel beyond its sealed walls. Within minutes, the second execution took place with the same brutal efficiency as the first. The mansion returned to its unnatural quiet as soon as the task was done. The bodies were removed through a separate underground exit that connected to the desert outskirts. Documents were shredded, digital fingerprints erased, and the room sterilized. The syndicate worked like a machine, leaving no trace behind to them. This was not a crime of passion or chaos. It was a scheduled operation, clean and emotionless, executed at the exact moment they no longer needed the identities of the women they had lured. Above the sealed rooms, the rest of the mansion resumed its pretend luxury, ready to host its next victims whenever the syndicate decided the time was right. Priya and Aisha had walked into the trap, believing they were beginning the most important project of their careers. Instead, their final moments had been claimed by a system designed to erase them with chilling precision. For days after Priya and Aisha disappeared, nothing seemed unusual from the outside. Their families believed they were busy with high-profile project work, and their employer assumed they were simply adjusting to the new time zone and tight schedules. The criminals behind the fake Sheikh had planned this part flawlessly. They had access to the women's devices, email accounts, and personal information, allowing them to send automated responses that sounded exactly like Priya and Aisha. Short messages were scheduled to reassure colleagues, mentioning delayed meetings and long hours. Simple updates were sent to family members, claiming the estate had strict rules on communication. Everything was designed to create a false sense of normalcy, while the criminals worked behind the scenes to use the women's identities for their financial schemes. The syndicate wasted no time. Within hours of the executions, digital copies of Priya and Aisha's documents were uploaded into offshore company portals. Fake bank accounts were opened in countries with weak oversight. Cryptocurrency wallets were activated using their names. Their digital signatures were used to authorize suspicious transfers, creating a trail of financial activity that made it appear the women were willingly participating. Because the accounts were linked to real identities, banks flagged nothing initially. Every move had been rehearsed dozens of times with previous victims, making it nearly impossible to detect early on. But the syndicate miscalculated one thing: the internal protocols of the event company. The company relied on strict weekly check, ins for all employees working overseas, especially on large budget projects. When neither woman attended their scheduled video conference, the company's operations manager grew uneasy. He attempted to reach them through email, phone, and messaging platforms. The responses that came back sounded strangely generic, almost automated. He sensed something was off and contacted the supposed client for verification. When the inquiry went unanswered and the listed contact number went dead, he escalated the issue immediately. The employer alerted authorities in India, who quickly involved international agencies. Investigators began tracing flight details, hotel reservations, and digital footprints. They noticed the hotel booking confirmations sent earlier had been cancelled quietly without explanation. The private flight records showed unusual routing and incomplete documentation. Forensic teams tracked the women's bank accounts and found abnormal activity originating from foreign servers. It was enough to trigger a full cross-border investigation. International law enforcement agencies raided several suspicious properties connected to the fake Sheikh persona. Many were empty, but inside one of the estates, investigators found rooms filled with printers, shredded documents, and equipment for creating fraudulent IDs. A collection of hard drives held images and profiles of previous victims. The scale of the operation stunned even experienced officers. When they finally located the desert mansion, it had been abandoned in haste. The luxurious exterior remained intact, but inside, investigators found hidden rooms, soundproof chambers, and leftover traces of the controlled environment the syndicate once operated. Surveillance recordings recovered from a damaged server revealed the last known moments of Priya and Aisha entering the estate, then disappearing into restricted areas. Even without their bodies, the evidence was overwhelming. Their digital disappearance, the fake communications, the financial transactions, and the surveillance footage collectively painted a devastating picture. The truth spread across news networks, sparking global outrage and calls for stronger protections against digital and international exploitation. Priya and Aisha's families never received the closure they hoped for, but their case transformed into a worldwide warning. Governments issued new guidelines on overseas job offers, and cybersecurity experts used the case to educate the public about identity trafficking. The memory of the two women lived on, not through the lies the syndicate tried to build, but through the awareness created in their name. Their story became a reminder that even the most polished opportunities can hide the darkest intentions, and that vigilance is sometimes the only shield against dangers that disguise themselves as dreams.